I would call the meeting to order for a special municipal council meeting on November 25th, 6 p.m. Welcome, everyone. Tonight we will be discussing the draft capital budget for 2026-2027. We begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we are happy to share the land that they have cared for centuries. With that, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Deputy Mayor Vino. All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Motion is carried unanimously. At this point, I will turn it over to Elena Wenzel, Director of Finance, to lead us through the draft capital budget.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to be here with you tonight to introduce your draft capital budget. I have the directors here as well who will be discussing their individual projects as we move forward. We can start in the beginning, kind of how we plan our capital budgets. So we look at things like environmental sustainability, infrastructure master plans, legislative requirements, our community wants and needs, and do some strategic planning, as well as look at asset management for replacement and refurbishment. So when we develop our capital budget, we determine what projects are necessary, and these feed into the priorities and decision-making, which becomes part of the long-term capital plan, which is then translated into your capital budget. So municipalities do charge taxes and fees to provide services that contribute to the quality of life for our residents. Capital infrastructure is the foundation of those services that we provide. Capital does compete for resources. We review competing projects as staff, and we bring those to you for council that kind of meet your strategic priorities and the plans that we've made. We determine financing. We consider intermunicipal cost-sharing agreements. We know that investment in large-scale projects may require a trade-off for capital maintenance items, and capital costs and ongoing maintenance costs are also a consideration in our 5-year plan. We look at several different sources and potential sources of funding for our capital projects. They include grants, our unrestricted reserves, contributions from operating towards capital and reserves, things like land sales and third-party contributions, as well as collaborative projects with other municipal units. And if we have a funding gap, we would look at debt to address that. So debt can be a valuable tool if we use it strategically. A debt management policy and communication of the policy is a key component to our capital plan. Debt can be viewed strategically. Municipalities are a going concern. Debt can be leveraged up to 25 years or over the life of the asset. In the debt service projections you'll see tonight, we've used 15 years as the amortization period. Debt does create some intergenerational equity. Use of debt facilitates future residents paying for their fair share of a capital project. It also allows for regeneration of financial capacity, where debt payments are usually fixed with declining balance interest, and tax revenue generally goes up over time, so your capacity to pay does increase. It's also an inflation shield. Project costs go up in the future. Debt provides protection because we know what the costs are now. Just like you would not buy a house, usually with cash, you would get a mortgage with payments you can afford. Borrowing strategically can mean that you can have assets to service the public now, and those assets are paid for over the time in which they're used. So in this draft capital plan, we do have 2 projects that will require some debt financing, including the Cookville Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is a $24.5 million estimated project with an estimate of about $8 million debt will be used to finance that project. As well, the Headville Pump Station system needs replacement. It's a $6 million project with about $1.5 million in borrowing. Borrowing will be secured when those projects are complete. Municipal reserves will be used for the short-term financing of the projects. So in our 5-year plan, we look at our projected debt service ratio, which is calculated against our municipal revenues. The municipal capacity is benchmarked, which is the red light on that graph, at 15%. So the debt service included in this plan runs between about 2.8 and 5.2% over the life of the term that's on the graph. As per our financial strategy, our 5-year financial strategy, our capital and operating budget projections are assessed against available resources. Projected reserves continue to show that the municipality is in a strong financial position. Council strategy includes spending capital reserves first, so more monies can be in the more flexible operating reserves and held for other things. As well, the operating reserves consistently exceed the FCI red flag threshold of 10% of the operating budget, which is on the graph on your left side. The operating reserves are the blue columns, and you can see that the red line is well below that threshold of 10% of your operating budget. The proposed debt financing in the 5-year plan does look to ensure that the combined reserves do not fall below the FCI threshold for combined reserves, which is the right side graph on this slide. So it's a big picture and includes all the proposed capital projects in our 5-year plan. So projects can be kept on the project list. They can be deferred or eliminated. This is all determined by you, council, and staff will endeavor to guide your decisions. So we will now move into the draft capital budget and Canada Community Building Fund infrastructure investment details. These are the details of the projects in year 1 of your 5-year capital plan. They are separated by department, so each director will come up and introduce their projects and we can discuss them. The first one is in the finance department, which is the tax bill portal. There's a $10,800 carryover from the original budget to complete the testing and implementation so that this software is ready for the April tax billing. There is provincial funding in our reserves to address the costs for this project. I'm going to turn things over now to Mr. Stephen Pace to discuss the engineering, public works, and wastewater projects.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. The first project we have in the Engineering and Public Works Department is the wastewater treatment van. The van we have is a 2014, and we're looking at a replacement. And we have some criteria that we'll be looking at, particularly all-wheel drive feature, because we have to go out in all kinds of weather and different areas. So this gets into, and there'll be more vehicles I think coming up later in the budget, but we have $120,000 budgeted, and that's kind of on the upper limit, and they'll be evaluated, the different type of vehicles that we'll be buying, whether it be gas, hybrid, or EV, and that'll be based on the life cycle cost of the vehicle. And we'll be presenting our analysis of the life cycle costs to council for a decision at the time before the purchase, so that'll come back to council. This is kind of like the worst case scenario, if you like, for the most expensive vehicle in terms of capital costs, but the evaluation will look at the operating overall life cycle costs. The next one is the Cookeville Wastewater Treatment Plant, and that's a multi-year project. We spent $2.5 million back in 2024. We had budgeted $6.5 in 25-26. We're a little ahead of that from a cash flow point of view at estimated about $9 million in this current budget year, leaving about $12 million in 26-27, and then a further cleanup of $1 million in 27-28. And the purpose of this, of course, is to continue with the construction of the plant to support housing development in the area. The project is generally going fairly well on schedule and on budget. So we have funding from ICIP of 73.33% of the $12 million, and MCGP 50% on 4 million. So our debt estimate there is about 8 million.
Can we ask a question as we go? So in 25-26, the 9 million, that still represents on budget?
Yes, it's sort of hard to predict when. Right now, there's a lot of expensive process equipment coming in. So when we were estimating our a year ago, it was hard to kind of judge when some of these expenses were going to be coming in. So there's actually a lot of equipment on site now, which is great to have, so we're not held up, but it's being stored on site, so it's more of a cash flow issue. The next one is the Jubilee Road sewer expansion, and that's estimated at $4 million. It's a joint intermunicipal project to address infrastructure requirements in Hebbville, and we have committed the $100,000 for design services. The town, it's a partnership with the town of Bridgewater, and that design is currently out to RFP and being managed by the town of Bridgewater. So that just recently came to council a short while ago. The next one is New Germany sewer system, the bridge heat tracing. There's a bridge in a sewer line running underneath a bridge in New Germany, and the current heat tracing is not working and requires replacement. And that's to keep, of course, from freezing in the winter months. So an estimate there is $150,000 and being funded from sewer reserves. The next one is the New Germany Legion sewer lateral. We've budgeted $25,000. There's a sewer line that requires replacement from the sewer main to the property line. They've been having trouble with their sewer line. The Legion has gone ahead and replaced their portion of the line, and it's been determined that we need to replace the MODL-owned infrastructure, and that'll be funded from funding depreciation reserves.
How old would these lines be?
They would be original. 50 some years. So we've done a number of repairs. We had a project a few years ago of doing all the infiltration, inflow upgrades. That was about $1 million that was done about 2 years ago. And so with an older system, you're running into these ongoing repairs as needed.
Just around the New Germany sewer system bridge heat tracing, I can't quite picture this, but when will that work be able to be completed? Is it weather dependent or? We haven't had trouble the last few years with it, but it's there in case we get really cold. But that would be looked at in this upcoming budget year. It will be completed within the budget year. So it's not like an urgent.
No, we're not looking for
project.
Pre-budget approval at this time.
Okay.
But it hasn't been working, and we want to get it. So we're planning it for this coming fiscal.
Which bridge, the lower or the upper? Lower? Okay, because I was going to say the upper was new and the pipes there were new like 7 years ago, so the lower. Okay, thank you.
I have invited my Larry Feener here. He looks after all our wastewater. He's a senior municipal engineer in our group that looks after water and wastewater. So I've invited him tonight because there's a lot of sewer items here, sewer and water. So if they have any detailed questions, it's a good opportunity to ask them.
Can I ask another question on sewer lines?
Sure.
Mostly because I don't know much about our infrastructure. We've heard a lot about the infrastructure in Bridgewater
Yeah.
and the need for replacement of so much of it. If the system in New Germany and the lines are as old as they appear to be, are we concerned about that? And if so, where is it in a planning process?
The actual collection system, if you like, in Germany, we've done a lot of recent upgrades and repairs around that was addressing infiltration inflows, like work around manholes. We had a consulting firm, I think it was back in 2015, video all the lines, and we continued to do that and flush them and identified all the weak areas. So that was about $1 million project that we just completed about like 2 years ago, was looking after all those maintenance kind of issues. We're not looking at a complete replacement of that collection system. We are looking down the road at a potential replacement of the whole treatment plant, and that's to address a lot of capacity issues if we wanted to look at growth in the area. And just maybe perhaps a higher level of treatment, but that's sort of more down the road, that we are looking at the plant upgrade before a collection upgrade. Next one is an annual manhole cover replacement program, and we're allowing $20,000 a year. And that's an annual program to uncover and adjust to grade, repair, replace manhole covers to allow access for maintenance and monitoring of sewers. And these are located in a variety of different locations. They could be in gravel shoulders, they could be on private property, and some are actually in paved roads. So there's a series of them. So we're looking at just tackling so many a year. It's just sort of an ongoing maintenance of the collection system, and it's looking at funding from depreciation reserves. This next one is we've titled Housing Service Laterals, and that's to design and install sewer and water laterals from the mains to the property line. And this is for the Copper Coast development at the corner of Highway 10 and Champlain Drive. And we're budgeting kind of a worst case scenario because we are hoping to utilize underground infrastructure already in the ground. There's a force main that was abandoned from the use of the school when we opened Nathan Cirillo Road. It goes right down to a pump station at the bottom of Nathan Cirillo. So there's an abandoned, I believe actually 2 abandoned force mains that go right to Highway 10. So for that development, we're certainly hoping to be able to use that infrastructure for that. We're committed to providing a service lateral to the property line for that development. So in case something doesn't work out well, we've put a little allocation there to cover the costs of that installation. And how that gets done, whether we do it ourselves or give the money to the developer to do, that can be decided later. And the funding will come from general operating reserves. The next one here is the Osprey Village Sidewalk Enhancement Project, and that's a $5 million project. That's currently in design mode this year. Design Point is our consultant. It's allowing for sidewalks down the side of Nathan Cirillo Road and up the Pine Grove Road, allowing a whole loop, walking from Highway 10 Champlain Drive, that whole loop. And it's curb and gutter where needed. We do have a water course crossing just down this side of the Nothing Fancy store. There's a water course, so that gets involved from an engineering point of view. Stormwater infrastructure. We're also looking at traffic signals at down by the Walmart at the foot of Pine Grove Road and Nathan Cirillo, which I think would be welcome to all, and that'll include pedestrian crossings. And we're looking at bench seating along Nathan Cirillo Road and the Pine Grove Road. So we're trying to incorporate some of beautification things within that budget as best as possible. We have grant funding, fairly rich on this project. ICIP at 1.814 and 204. Like 1.8 million basically, MCGP of a little over 1.1 million, and AT fund of 504,000. So our municipal general operating reserve will fund the remainder at just over $1 million, $1,044,800. So it's a fairly well-funded project and well into design. We hope to be able to go to tender for construction. The plan is for this year and have it all completed in the next fiscal. the two things that we're working with Public Works for approvals, because we will be working on their right-of-ways and putting intersection lighting there. So we're working in cooperation with them and other groups to get all the approvals we need to proceed.
The folks at Stonemont will be happy.
Yeah.
They've been asking if we would be doing something, so it would be more accessible for walking, and the safety concerns of crossing the Pine Grove Road to get to the shopping on the other side, so.
Yeah. And we had a traffic study done there by Design Point in preparation for the design work, and we did it before the school got out, so it was busier. We didn't want to do it in the summer, so we have all the data, so that's all falling into place nicely. The water tower project, it's it's been postponed for several years. We're budgeting $1.5 million this year, and I guess that's, if all goes well, that would be for site selection, design, and site preparation. We did award the design to CBCL back in 2022, actually, and we're working with the town of Bridgewater in partnership on this project. And we've just received the draft, or a little while ago, a draft master water study of the whole the town of Bridgewater Public Service Commission system. So that is now going to the PSC, or the Public Service Commission, on December 11th for acceptance of this study, and then go from there. Year 2 and 3, we're looking, the estimates are growing, as time goes on, and also the scope of the water tower is getting larger as well. So we're looking at $7.6 million for the tower and all its connections in years 2 and 3. And that will be funded from ICIP grant of 73.3%, with MODL and the town of Bridgewater sharing the balance. And our share will come from general operating reserves. That's it for sewer and water. So moving on, our Linos room acoustic improvements, we've allocated $25,000. This is for the room adjacent to us with the movable wall. The acoustics is fairly challenging in that room for meetings, and particularly bad for when we're remotely having meetings. There's a lot of echo and really hard to sort of make out. So we did have a firm come in to do a technical kind of review rather than just kind of taking a shot at it and getting some real quantitative kind of analysis of it. And we just got a draft report back, and so that it's going to recommend wall sound absorption panels on the walls. In addition, it's similar to our ceiling here. You can see all sound absorption panels. And so in carpeting, in that room, it's all hard surface mostly, and so it's very echoey. So it's been challenging when you're trying to have arrange meeting spaces, and there's only very limited spaces in the building. So we're trying to make that a little more flexible. So we're looking at sound panels there primarily as a solution. J-Class Roads, that's a partnership with Nova Scotia Public Works, and we allocate $350,000 annually towards potential projects there. This is for non-MODL roads from the Service Exchange agreement from the 1990s. And basically, we're carrying our same list forward from last year, 24-25, and our first priority road is the Darby's Head Road at 0.45 kilometers, followed by the St. Augustine Road at 0.13 kilometers, Riverside Drive, Freeman, Riverview, Church. We have a total of 3.12 kilometers that we're having requests. So we've submitted that now to Public Works, and they'll be evaluating and getting back to us. And any funding is from the CCBF. And so we haven't had any for the last 2 years. We have been very successful in some years, but we've had the last 2 years without any. So hopefully we'll get at least some of those next year.
Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. My question is around the funding that we set aside. When the roads are not chosen, the funding goes back into, I can't remember what it's called. Elena, what is it?
The Canada Community Building Fund?
Yes, it goes back. Do we ever, like, add it up to increase the pot? So if it was not used this year, that would stay there, and then next year we would have 700,000 if it wasn't used? Or is the funding used for another purpose? And I ask this with the cost of everything increasing and making sure we're budgeting properly for the cost of J-class roads.
Through your worship, back to the deputy mayor. In our experience in the last couple of years, the roads that we have been doing in partnership with the Nova Scotia Public Works has come in less than this budget amount. I think a few years ago, it might have been 250, I think we had, and we did increase it to 350. The one thing about the Canada Community Building Fund, it varies every year, but we get around 1.1, 1.2 million a year. And there's certain projects that fit really well with the program, and they're very easy to claim, and paving is one of them. So they're very particular about how we report on it, but the goal is always to spend that money. So if you start saving up the Canada Community Building Fund itself, you will get questions from the Gas Tax Secretariat. I don't know what their name is now, but the secretariat who looks after it, on why you're not spending, those monies. So we just continue to budget this, and if they don't come through, then we look at using the CCBF for other projects that might qualify under that umbrella. So we've done trails with it. We give money to the trails groups every year with it. It's good for any park infrastructure. It can go on sustainability projects, all those kinds of things, but it's easier, in my opinion, to pick a big project with very few invoices when you're starting to be audited for those kinds of things. And since we have lots of those projects, and this funding is a third-party funding, we wouldn't want to use our own, we wouldn't want to save this money up and use our own reserves to fund projects, because it's intended to be used. So that's how we've been using it, because that's part of our strategy, is to use other people's money first and use ours at the end.
Thank you. That
that
completely
helpful?
outlines everything, and I certainly don't want them to question and give us less, so that makes sense that it's designated. Thank you for the clarification.
Good. Our next project is the demolition remediation at the center school, and we budgeted $5.5 million there, and that's based on all the environmental site assessment work that's been done. Strum Consulting is our site professional that have helped us through all the assessment work. We've had environmental site assessment phase 1, 2, and 3, and a hazmat survey of the building itself. So it's pretty well, it's shelf ready now, and we have good estimates of what we expect it to cost. We just are just in the process now and of applying for the grid grant funding for 50%, and the balance of funding includes asset retirement liability of $1 million, which I know Elena's been keeping, and a general operating reserve of $1.7 million. And it's, I think we've said all along, the project will not be proceeding without some level of grant funding from other levels of government. But the project is shelf ready. The tender's been pretty well prepared. All the ESA work, so we're teed up, ready to go.
Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. I should have asked this morning. Do we know when we would expect to hear back on the funding for the grid grant? You know? No, okay.
The next one is an annual allocation of $60,000 for green compost carts for the MJSB purchase on our behalf. We do own the carts. MODL owns them. It's our asset, therefore it's in the capital budget. And It's an annual purchase. Actually, the purchase just went through from this year here about 2 months ago, and it was from those from around earlier councillors, it was in the $30,000 range, but now a lot of the carts are aging. And with cost increases, MGSB requested 2 years ago, we increased that to $60,000, and those are funded from depreciation reserves. The next one is the Wiles Lake garage or depot building. The demolition of $125,000 was. We have done hazmat, some hazmat work there, assessment, and that's mostly asbestos related. And so that was, the estimate was based on our consultant, our site professional for that location. That was the estimate they provided us. So it's a guideline for us, but we're looking at demolishing that building this year and the funding from depreciation reserve. The next one is a water fill station for residents, and we've allocated $150,000, and that's been given the hardship that many Emmerdale residents have had this year in accessing water, and we've done some temporary measures this year, but there's really a desire to have something more permanent and more accessible. So we'll be working with the PSC, the Public Service Commission, to try to come up with solutions. We're not really in the water business, and there's a lot to it, and so we're working with that partner. But it is to design and construct a year-round water fill station, and it will be funded from general operating reserves. We don't really know at this point. It's kind of like there's a lot of options to be considered. Some may be substantially more, some may less expensive, some possibly could be more. There's just, it's going to take a study. We're going to have to really research to find out what is the best and most economical way. We've been exploring a lot of options are being kicked around, and we're just trying to find the best one, but we really haven't had a lot of time, staff time to kind of really dig into it yet. So it's sort of an allocation that we're putting aside those funds.
I hope we can do it for less than $150,000.
I hope.
I think, watching people this year, they were just thankful there was access to water. I don't think we need a fancy outlet. We need something that's available year-round.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing, but I hope we can do it for significantly less than $150,000.
Yes, and I think if we work with the PSC and just what type of, if we're filling water bottles as opposed to totes, there's a lot. We have seasons here, and that's been a challenge. That's why we're only able to offer the bottles now. So I think we're probably conservative on that number. I would hope so as well, but.
Councillor Smith.
Just on the timeline, you said you haven't had time to look at it lately, but, which is understandable, but is there some projected timeline for when we might see?
I think it depends on the options that we're able to come up with, and working with the PSC, if they're able to develop some options that are faster than others. We certainly have offered this temporary solution, but it depends on how elaborate the solution becomes. So that'll all come back to council. We'll be coming back with, some analysis and recommendations for the council's decision. It's a bit premature right now, but it is in the capital budget for this coming year, though.
But this wouldn't be in place for this winter. It's next year's budget.
I was thinking more in terms of, will it be in place for the next drought season?
And it could, depending on what solution, and if not, we'll continue to offer some temporary measures. But some of the options would be take longer than others. And it's a bit premature because the ideas are still popping up.
Again, I hope we can do this you know, we're doing big projects. Surely we can do a smaller project like this in a way that can make it available for next,
Yeah.
that we're ready for next season of drought. I hope we can do that.
That was the last engineering slide, so we'll move on to planning and development with Jeff Merrill, our Director of Planning and Development Services.
Yeah, so first up in planning and development is vehicle replacements. We've got 150,000 budgeted for 2 vehicles. The 2 requirements that we need is ground clearance and all-wheel drive for accessing construction sites. And like the other vehicles, the vehicle life cycle tool will be used to determine which type of vehicle that is, and funding's from our depreciation reserve, and there's revenue from our inspection, regional inspection services agreement model, whatever we're calling it, service, sorry, it's a long day. All right. Public transit, this accounts for if we were to buy 2 new buses to provide fixed route transit to Osprey Village. Again, funding for this would be general operating as well as the CCBF funds. This is a placeholder to purchase land with a conservation value attached to it. And if council was to purchase land, it would come from the sustainability reserve.
And that's the last planning slide. So we'll be looking at Trudy Payne, our Director of Recreation, Parks and Tourism, to discuss the Recreation, Parks and Tourism projects.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council, and I've asked the Director of Engineering to attend in case there's any questions from an engineering perspective that I might not be able to address. The first slide concerning the Recreation, Parks and Tourism projects is a park vehicle replacement, and we have budgeted $100,000. This is to replace a used truck, 2011, with a new truck. Our park staff goes all across the municipalities. If anybody's seen the maps of our parks, you know that they're from one end to the other. And again, as Mr. Pace had indicated, we'd use the vehicle life cycle tool, which would help inform the type of vehicle we should be purchasing from a long-term operation and maintenance point of view as well. And the anticipated funding would be coming from depreciation reserves. The second item is a dump trailer, and this is to support our park staff and the work that they do every day. Has been identified by the staff is a necessary piece of equipment from an occupational health and safety perspective. So that's why we have here to mitigate the risk of injury of park staff, because instead of getting up and down on the back of a truck, the dump truck would make, the dump trailer would make it much easier. And the general operating reserves is what's being proposed to fund this acquisition. The MARC upgrade, so as we've discussed, we had put out an RFP to look at MARC upgrades, and this has been identified as a regional park. We're looking at about a $4 million total project over a 2-year span. So we're looking at just over $2 million for year 1, and this is really looking at some of the major upgrades that need to be done. Staff are proposing removal of the buildings. As Mr. McEwen had indicated, they have been closed since 2020 to the public, and needing some staff space. We do have park staff there that's year-round, some are seasonal, but we also have our recreation team and our, in the summer, and our tourism staff based out of the MARC at this point in time. So we would be looking at staff space and also storage space for any of that programming equipment or any of the park staff equipment. So for example, we do have an equipment loan program that is run out of the MARC where we loan out skis and snowshoes and big board games that people borrow to take and play on their lawn, not to mention the number of park park pieces of equipment that we have as well to do their day-to-day task. And another feature that was identified by council was a possibility of an accessible playground at the Mark. So this would be to look at concept designs and to start working on some of this work for the Mark. And again, it would be over a 2-year span with a estimated budget of $4 million. So it's really around Mark upgrades.
Deputy Mayor Vino.
Just a question. I know this would have been in the previous council term, but I can't recall. Did we ever look at the budget for renovating as opposed to tearing down the brick building? What the cost would be to renovate versus tearing down?
Go ahead, Tom.
I don't know if we specifically looked at it, but it would be likely prohibitively expensive and it's oversized for use. So if you renovate it, you would have to bring it all up to code. And almost no aspect of the building is currently to code, including the ramp that leads up to it. So it's, I think we've got information on the contamination in the building, Stephen, is that?
We have some hazmat information, and we're just getting a proposal right now for a hazmat survey and to do the ESA, or environmental site assessment work that we've done like in Center School, to get it ready, so we'll have a clearer idea of demolition costs as well. But we have an idea about the asbestos, but because that was for financial reasons, Elena needs for a reserve fund. But we don't have a complete analysis of the building, but there are hazardous materials in there.
Okay, follow-up to that, and I don't know what we call the other building that's summer staff use, the admin building, is that also going to be proposed to be torn down?
That's what's being proposed on this slide, is that would be the building removal of the barn, the admin building, and the program building, and I think maybe the root cellar. I don't know if you want to add to that.
And I can comment that there is actually more asbestos in that building than there is in the program building because of the age of the building. So.
And so it is, $4 million is the budget that we're working with, and so although we don't have our Class D or even our Class A budget we're anticipating that the removal of the buildings and the new buildings for the park staff, the recreation summer staff and tourism staff, along with some programming space, not to compete with the community hub next door, but some community space or programming space, and the accessible playground is probably going to take most of that envelope.
Yeah, I was bringing that up because it'll go fast with tearing down 2 buildings and not leaving a whole lot left, knowing that you have to address the functions of summer staff, park staff, and other uses down there.
Yeah, so the funding that's being proposed is general reserves for the concept plan. So this year, what actually would be in the budget is a carryover of the $25,000. We have $80,000 budgeted for the Mark for the concept plan, so it would be the carryover. And then we'd be looking at doing some of the other work in years 1 and 2, and also the depreciation reserve for the asset replacement. So that would be the buildings.
Councillor Smith.
Just as far as the tender that we approved recently for the concept designs, there's public consultation involved in that?
That was the original intent, to have public consultation, and we may need to have a little bit further discussion with the $4 million being proposed for the Mark. Staff went and revisited that and felt that if this is what we're proposing, the staff space and equipment storage and the building removal and accessible playground, it could take that $4 million envelope.
So no public consultation?
I'll let Mr. McEwen stick.
So there's, public consultation was originally contemplated on a $10 million possible budget. And that was for the Mark with also Wells Lake. So the RFP for public consultation was for both parks to be developed. Council set the budget for this project at $4 million, and we've identified removal of buildings as a necessity, because it would be, I don't think it'd be reasonable to leave them standing without using them. And then replacing the space for staff, equipment storage. And our park standard says one of our regional parks will have a fully accessible playground. River Ridge, which is a regional park, isn't suitable for a fully accessible playground. And Walls Lake is smaller and narrower. So most of the space that would be available for an accessible playground is found at the Mark. And during the previous term of the previous council, when there was discussion about putting a ball field putting a playground next to the ball field, at that time the discussion was contemplated that the fully accessible playground would go at the Mark. So there could be engagement about what features are included in the accessible playground. We will be doing stakeholder engagement as part of the public engagement for the ball field users, for example, because there is a project in here for the ball field users, and there's other things we want to discuss with the ball field users related to the use of the space. So the engagement that was originally contemplated at $10 million is significantly changed by a $6 million reduction in budget, which will likely mostly go to the buildings. So given the contamination in the buildings and the fact that they haven't been used for public use since 2020, limited public engagement on whether or not the buildings should be demolished, I don't think is terribly useful for either building. And normally we don't engage the public when we're building space for staff. So Stephen has taken steps to look at what the cost of demolition is, because that's our starting point. That will allow us to see what's left for the rest of the elements of the project. We'll get costing for the building, and then that will tell us what's remaining for the rest of the upgrade, if anything. So the majority of the engagement for the Mark will be stakeholder engagement, and we are going to engage staff to determine the functional space requirements for the, we anticipate 2 buildings, one for the staff and one for the parks crew, with a bit of storage in both. Because the parks crew, which is about 10 to 12 people during the summer, aren't in the building for the winter, that space could be available for the public to use over the winter, but it's designed as a bullpen type arrangement for summer staff to work out of. It's going to exist into the winter, and arrangements can be made to make that into public space, but it'd be designed as office space. So there's limited ability or limited usefulness in engaging, but the Mark with $4 million, it's pretty limited. Walls Lake, on the other hand, is a blank slate, so the engagement on that can be more fulsome to see what it makes sense to do. And in that, we also have to engage the stakeholder fire departments, because they have a fire department use for the space, which has to be accommodated in whatever we do. Walls Lake. So that's what we're looking at. And then working with the consultants to come up with an engagement plan that will be presented to council, because the council approves the engagement plan before we go out with them.
We used to call it another name, the Mark project, when it was, I think, in previous years, and it was reimagining. Well, when you set the budget to work the envelope, which we agreed to do for our parks, and you don't really have room to imagine, you have requirements. That name is going to disappear from our discussion to reflect more accurately the costs associated with the building structures, and not build expectations about a lot of changes there. And there's been almost $1 million invested in it in the last year, together with what we'll put in. So the project looks a little different than what I think was talked about when we were first elected as council. Any other questions? Okay, let's let's move on.
The next slide, Mr. McEwen alluded to this, is looking at a parking lot in the upper, if anybody's been to the ball fields, we have 3 ball fields, there's 2 upper and 1 lower. It's very difficult to get to the 2 upper from an accessibility point of view and also from a safety point of view. If somebody has an accident or an ambulance needs to get there or a fire truck needs to get there. So this has been identified as a safety concern. So be looking at year 1 of designing the parking lot with construction in year 2. And funding would come from general operating reserves for the design and depreciation reserve for the construction. And this is to address both a safety and an accessibility concern. And the pickleball courts, so this is a carryover from the $600,000 that was approved by council. Some funds have been spent this year. The pickleball courts will be fully constructed next year, so there's a carryover of $540,000. And this would come from that pickleball reserve that's been set aside. The Hillside Cemetery Monument, this is a carryover, $150,000. So we have got the interpretive panel fixed, and the rock from Des Moines is on its way with the new monument with the correct information. So we still need to do quite an extensive program, which I'll be meeting with Sandra this week to talk about how we can get the word out to folks to see if they even want to participate in this program, to even determine whether council would be spending $150,000 in the future or not. So this is really a carryover in case that comes to fruition. And that would be from the general operating reserve. Okay, then the next is the Wiles Lake Park development. Again, we had $30,000 budgeted. This is the $15,000 is the carryover because some of the work will be done around that public engagement, that public consultation. They'll be working on the concept designs and Class D budgets to develop the Wiles Lake Park. And then the park design and construction would happen in years 2 and 3 with, again, a $4 million envelope for this particular park. So it's just continuing with the consultation, get that What We Heard report, get that get the design for the park and the Class D budgets. And Miller Point Peace Park, this is a carryover from the project that we have been undertaking this year. So all the awards to the contractors have taken place. As you're aware, we have had the installation of the accessible canoe kayak launch. That's been removed for the winter, and the remainder of this carryover is to finish the accessible trail that would lead from the outer parking lot to the inner parking lot and do some other accessibility upgrades to a couple of the other loops at Miller Point Peace Park. We did receive funding of $150,000 from the province, and the rest of the funding would come from the Canada Community Building Fund. Again, Indian Falls Park accessibility upgrades. This is a carryover from what is currently happening this year. And the primary reason for this carryover is to complete the look-off. So if anybody's been at Indian Falls, you'll know where the look-off is that overlooks the falls. It's a safety concern, and so we're going to be replacing that. I know Maria is currently working on the accessible washroom, and the pad, I think, has been laid for the gazebo and the picnic tables and the benches and the paths leading to those places. And I know that the trail has been upgraded to that accessibility level that leads down to the new beautiful spot, if anybody hasn't been there, that's really quite serene looking over the river. And there's a question. Yeah.
Councillor Smith.
Can you talk a little bit about that, the safety issue on the look-off and how it's being addressed?
So we're replacing maybe not exactly, but the same concept, and maybe Stephen can speak to this. I believe we're looking at some, maybe not plexiglass, but I'll let Stephen speak to that, because him and Maria are much more involved with this portion of the
Yeah,
project.
we actually had this ready and designed and all priced and everything, but the weather we ran out of weather. But there's currently there's an old chain link fence with exposed wire edges and so on. There's a big O running around the top of it, so we priced sort of a precast stone to go around that circular area with a railing, with a galvanized steel railing type of, or I don't know the exact material we've settled on, but that's still up in the air, but a nice railing that you can actually look through as well for visual. But right now it's an old ratty, rusty chain link fence with held together by wire.
Served its purpose in this day.
Yeah.
And again, that's to come from the Canadian Community Building Fund, which has already been allocated. The next slide is in reference to the presentation that the Riverport and Area Park Committee came and spoke to council about, where they have raised a significant amount of dollars themselves. I think it was $300,000. They came asking council for $200,000 to help with the park development, and pitched the idea that council could consider if you wanted to give money, either over a 1 to 3 year time frame. So what is being proposed in this 5-year capital plan is over the next 3 years. That would contribute $170,000 to their capital costs, because part of their cost was also around operating dollars, $10,000 each year in operating, which would make that total of $200,000. So the contribution this year that's being proposed is $60,000. Adding up to that $170,000 over the 3 years, with $10,000 being proposed each year for the next 3 years in the operating budget. That would total that $200,000. So the funding proposed for that, because we do own the property, is the open space reserve. And then Saw Pit Wharf construction. As council is aware, we had the wharf assessed and it was deemed not to be safe, so the decision was made to close it. So this is an additional piece of the concept plan that wasn't in place at the time. So we're looking at doing this project still within the $4 million envelope over the next 2 years, with year 1 being the park water features, which would include the replacement of some type of the wharf that would be removed. So, and then the year 2 would be the parkland features based on the amount of funding that we had remaining within the $4 million. So you'll note, and I think Elena has a motion that might be coming up later, is that we are seeking pre-budget approval so that we can proceed with getting the design build for the wharf and getting the designs continued, so that we're ready basically to start developing and constructing the water features this spring. And the funding would come from the depreciation reserves. And then the park roads, these are the next 2 slides. So this is Miller Point Peace Park. So again, the main road that goes in there, a lot of potholes, constantly every couple of weeks requires park staff to go and refill and do those potholes. So it needs either a good grading or a major overlay. And so it's estimated at $90,000 to bring that park road up to a good maintenance standard. And then the next road is Mush Mush. This is being estimated at $250,000. And again, this is upgrades to existing roads for easier future maintenance. Stephen can probably speak better to this, but I do understand that there needs to be some culvert replacements and maybe some ditching, a lot more detailed work than the Miller Point Peace Park Road. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, I think there's three cross culverts, some clearing, ditching, and gravel. There's a fair amount of work to that road.
Okay, and then this is a new one, and I'll probably have Stephen speak to this as well. This is near the United Communities Marine Park. There is a road that's called Spruce Lane that leads into that park, but also has a number of residents on the road. And I understand that the municipality acquired this road in 2008. We are seeking $125,000, again, seeking pre-budget approval because there is a need to replace the culvert to address some flooding that is happening in that area and towards neighbors' properties. So yeah, that's why there is pre-budget approval, because we'd like to get it addressed sooner rather than later. And the funding is being proposed through the Canada Community Building Fund. We do own it, and it is our piece of infrastructure. And then the wharf assessment upgrades. So this is specifically to Rose Bay Wharf. We own two wharfs, which is Saw Pit Wharf and Rose Bay. And as part of our maintenance and making sure we're doing our due diligence, we have these assessed once every 3 years. We had Saw Pits done last year, 1 year ahead, just because we were doing that bigger project. So this lands to year 3 for Rose Bay Wharf. So this would be doing this assessment to determine what, if any, upgrades might be needed for that wharf. So this is something we've been budgeting for once every 3 years, and it's to come from the depreciation reserves.
Councillor Bell.
I was just wondering if there has been a change. I didn't hear any discussion on the Rose Bay Wharf. When it was purchased with the agreement that the wharf was there for as long as it stood. If a storm took it out a week after we bought it, we weren't going to replace it. The community at the time understood that, and there was no discussion since, to my knowledge. So now we are going to have it assessed and possibly rebuild it?
I guess that would be, if I could address that, that would be a decision of council. It is an asset, so we have to determine whether it's usable, if it's usable or not safe. And if it wasn't safe, I guess, council would make the decision like, they need to make a decision like they did with Saw Pit, and your decision certainly could be within the realm of closing it, removing it, and not reopening it. But we do this from a due diligence perspective, and no, we've done this
every 3 years.
Every 3 years, we've been doing this for a while, yeah. And this next slide is our annual contribution to the trail groups, which I believe Ms. Wenzel alluded to. For a number of years, I can't remember for how long, we have 8 trail groups that manage a number of the Rails to Trails. They have letter of authority with the province, who actually owns the property, but in recognition of all the volunteer work and the value that this recreation asset brings to our residents and visitors to the area. So we do it based on a per kilometer rate, so it's fair. If you manage 4 kilometers, you still get the same, or whether you, the per kilometer, or whether you manage 13, you still get that per kilometer rate. And at some point in time, there was a motion made of council to increase it 10% per year, and that number of 90,500 represents that 10% increase to help the trails with some of their day-to-day capital requirements on the trails. And again, this comes from the Canada Community Building Fund. And then art on the trail or in the parks. This was just awarded for this year today at council. So this is putting $50,000 in this year's budget to continue with art installations on our trails and parks. And the funding proposed for this is from the Open Space Reserve.
If I may, the $50,000 that we had in the budget this year was a combination of
Yes,
a
it was.
carryover. So this is an increase.
It is an increase. It
And
is a-
thinking behind that?
The thinking behind that was because we really got, in our estimation as staff, a really caliber piece of art work, and it's reflected in what you get for submissions, I guess is what they say. If you have more money, you get, I don't want to say higher quality art, because, but you get, significant public art pieces. That was the rationale behind that. And of course, this would be at council's prerogative if they wanted to go back and say, no, that needs to be decreased. I think I can't remember what was in the 5-year capital plan from last year, but I do believe the figure was around 26 or 30, but I'm going based on memory right now. But yes, it would be, it does reflect an increase. Okay.
Yep.
The next slide is one that is typical that we've, again, seen over many years. This is land purchases, and this is for open space acquisition. So we always put a placeholder in there of 50,000 in case an opportunity comes up for us to acquire land for future park development. Elena has noted on this slide that the estimated balance at the end of March 31st, 2026 is 1.7 million in that reserve. So we just put 50 there just to make, to just show that if there's an opportunity, there is funding there. And then the last slide I think that I have is the internal wayfinding. So this is, we didn't get the internal park wayfinding strategy done. We had a secondment happen at the LCLC, which prohibited this from happening. So we've budgeted 50,000 to develop that internal wayfinding strategy and to possibly look at installing signs or wayfinding signs in at least one of our parks. And funding would be general operating in the reserves.
Councillor Hobley.
My question isn't on this slide. It's that you said it was your last slide.
Okay.
And in 2011, the boat launch at Maliga Lake was a priority. That's 15 years of asking to have it thought about or looked at. The public access to Maliga Lake was taken because it was private property. I am beyond disappointed that 15 years and we're still asking. We're adding gazebos to parks that don't need them, but we have no access to Maliga Lake. That has always been there for fishing tournaments. And we have a park, if you want to call it that. It's a grassed area that does give you water access with fence. So I hope I'm getting my disappointment across here.
So if I could address that. So the direction that council passed and gave us through motion was to not consider a list of parks for any future upgrade, including Maliga and Pine Grove, until council adopted the park criteria, which has only recently been presented to council, hasn't been finalized and hasn't been accepted. So having been given direction by council not to include those, it wasn't open for us to include them in the budget. Certainly council members are at liberty to introduce items, but having been given that direction, we couldn't include them.
Well, I feel that I did bring this to council more than once.
So it would be, because council gave a direction through motion,
Right, I
we
understand.
would need a direction to do something contrary or different. So bringing it up at council for discussion gets us part of the way there, but council would then have to take steps to, as a positive step, to have us revisit the matter. So our current plan is when the criteria get set, and then council has the discussion, I think there were four parks that were in the list, then we'll be moving forward on those.
Okay.
Councillor Burns.
I just want to ask for clarification, both for myself at the end of a long day and also for any residents who may wish to refer back to this if I refer them to our discussion. So the plan is, if we're looking at either new parks or moving parks or additions such as the boat launch or Pine Grove, that we would be having that conversation once we finish the park criteria. And so if we're not bringing it up today as councillors fighting for money directly in this budget, we kind of have a holding pot in general, and we'll be having future conversations about parks once the park criteria is finished.
If I could, not sure what the reference is to a pot of money. This is the capital budget.
Yeah, sorry. The last slide, the reference that there was a line in there for potential land acquisition, new parks, etc. Perhaps I misunderstood that.
Oh, okay, that's so the open space money is different. So What staff's understanding is the draft criteria went to council for review. I think it was even outside of a council meeting, if I recall. So it still has to go to council and be approved by council as the next step, and then council will make decisions based upon the accepted criteria on what, if anything, will be done with the 4 listed parks that were referenced in the motion. Council has also indicated that its position is we're not acquiring new land for new parks until we upgrade the parks that we have. So what we have in the budget is if an opportunity presents itself to acquire land that council wants us to acquire, we have a reserve account that we can access, and money's made available annually to grow that reserve.
That helps me understand that last slide. Thank you.
Counselor Smith.
So when is the draft criteria coming back to council? And for us to have a chance to finalize it and then move on from there? Just to give us an idea of like what the timing is.
So I'm going to refer
Around
that
this discussion.
to the director.
Yes, so the intent is to bring a report probably to the policy and strategy, unless directed differently, in January, so that you can have some robust conversation and then perhaps make a motion the following week at the council meeting.
Deputy Mayor Vino.
And another clarification question, if that report comes in January, the capital budget won't have been passed by then. Is there room to make adjustments or changes based on that report that's coming in this year's budget?
Thank you for the question. So the budget is always subject to change at council's direction until it's passed. So we haven't included items here that we've been specifically told not to include. So council could add them and find additional money, or add them and subtract certain things, but we have a number of meetings for the capital budget over the next several months. So the two things can progress at the same time.
Counselor Burns.
I just wanted to note thank you, because I know we're both asking staff to come up with a budget and set it on a process, and also putting a pin in this to say we're going to circle back to a big part of this. And I think my questions earlier were probably a little bit more pointed than they meant to be, so thank you for explaining that and the duality of the process as we clearly talk about parks amongst ourselves.
Okay.
Yes, thank you to our directors, Trudy Payne and Stephen Pace, for going over those projects. So we're ready to kind of summarize this. So your 5-year, this is a summary of the 5-year draft capital budget, our first kick at the can, and like we've talked about, like this is an ongoing process for us. So the draft capital budget does include investment in wastewater upgrades and recreation infrastructure to improve the quality of life for municipal residents. It is our first draft to introduce the proposed capital budget. So we expect that there could be changes in the upcoming months as you continue to review these budgets. But the 5-year plan right now is at about $66.5 million. Of which 29 million is coming from our own municipal reserves. So we have multiple grants and things like that of over 27 million. So with about a $9.5 million borrowing in this 5-year plan. So staff will certainly entertain any questions that you have if there's any more. And we are looking for 2 pre-budget approvals so we can move forward on a couple of the items that we think are more urgent in nature and can't wait until March 31st.
Deputy Mayor Vino, do you want to propose the first motion? And this is time sensitive because of weather.
Absolutely, thank you. To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council give pre-budget approval for the removal, replacement of the existing wharf and water features at Saw Pit Wharf Park in the amount of $2 million to be paid from the Depreciation Reserve Fund, and I so move.
And a seconder for the, seconded by Councillor Bell. Is there discussion on the motion? We've talked that one through, I think, at some point, because it's quiet around the table or you're all worn out. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Motion is carried unanimously. And the second motion that we need pre-approval on relates to the culvert repair at United Communities Park. And I think, again, there's some urgency to this to get it fixed before we have winter rains and floods and weather, snow melting. So, Councillor Reinhardt, would you like to propose this?
To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council give pre-budget approval for the culvert replacement on the driveway known as Spruce Lane at the United Communities Park in the amount of $125,000 to be paid from the Canada Communities Building Fund, and I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Brooks. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor signify by raising their hands. Motion is carried unanimously. There is an issue that has been raised by the capital budget discussions, and that's around public transit. And we have had some discussion on the public transit proposals and information that was presented to us by the town of Bridgewater. And after discussing this with Tom, it really, I think we need a clearer understanding from the town about how we can accommodate this and how we can work through planning and implementing a public transit plan that would include us. And we heard a lot of information, but I think we need a broader discussion with the town. And it would be my recommendation that we, and Deputy Mayor Vino has a motion that she can table, that we refer this to our joint growth committee to have that discussion with them. And in order for that to happen, we have to have a motion approved at our council meeting. We can't just bring something up in that form without council's approval. So it would be my recommendation, because of the complexity of what's being proposed for public transit, and also the fact that we're trying to work through this in concert with another municipal unit, that we do have that conversation with them and not separate discussions going back and forth. I think there are going to be times as we work through this that a joint conversation will be very helpful. So I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Vino.
In the slide that was presented tonight on public transit, $600,000 is what was presented on the slide. And there is probably more discussion to have. We're excited about transit, but being able to bring it back to that joint committee, we felt was the next step. And with that, I'm prepared to put a motion on the floor. To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council refer the discussion of an expansion of the town of Bridgewater transit system into abutting communities to the Regional Growth Management Committee and identify options for council's consideration. And I so move.
You're seconding it, Councillor Moore. Is there discussion on this? This will come back. Clearly, that was stated in the motion, but it does provide the forum when both councils can discuss it, or council representatives can discuss it. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by raising their hands. Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you for that. We have no one present for public input. I hope that in the discussions to come around budget, we will attract some interest from the public and we'll have them in attendance. So with no further business on the agenda, the meeting is adjourned.